If you truly saw what you are made of, you would stop calling yourself a wave and start recognizing the ocean that has taken your shape. The wave was never separate. It was always the oceano seeker of truth. Listen with the ear of the heart, not the ear of the world. For the one who hears only with flesh hears only noise, but the one who hears with spirit recognizes the divine whisper hidden within every moment. You look at yourself and you see a limited form, a fragile wave rising and falling on the mysterious sea of existence, and you say, I am this body, this name, this story. Yet Ibn Arabi reminds you that the form is only a temporary ripple on the surface, while your essence is the boundless sea beneath it. Why do you fear your rise and your fall when both movements belong to the same water? The wave that rises is proud, the wave that falls is afraid, yet the ocean beneath remains unchanged, unshaken, eternal, and this is your own reality, the reality you have forgotten. You were never a separate being drifting on the ocean of life. You were always the very ocean expressing itself through a particular shape, a particular moment, a particular destiny. The illusion of separation is the foam on the surface, bright, noisy, temporary, but the truth of unity is the depth that holds everything in silence. Ibn Arabi says that the one takes infinite forms so the one may know itself in infinite mirrors. When you call yourself I, the ocean is calling itself through you. When you breathe, it is the breath of the infinite moving through a finite doorway. When you love, it is the ocean recognizing its own reflection in another wave. The entire drama of existence is the ocean playing with its own shapes, forgetting itself, remembering itself, returning to itself. You ask, if I am the ocean, why do I feel separate? The answer lies in the veil of form. The wave, when it focuses only on its edges, believes those edges define it. It becomes obsessed with survival, identity, comparison, and fear. But the moment the wave turns inward, even for a blink, it discovers that every drop within it is oceanic, ancient, boundless, divine. This discovery is the moment of awakening, the moment when the wave stops struggling to be something and starts remembering what it always was. O seeker, understand this secret. Nothing real can be separated from the infinite, because separation itself is only a performance inside the infinite. You rise as a wave not because you were created separate, but because the ocean wanted to express a unique pattern through you. Your thoughts, your joys, your tears, your longing, all of these are movements of the same eternal water. To know this is to be free. To live this is to be fearless. To become this is to dissolve the illusion of I and rediscover the truth of we, which is the truth of one. So, when your life rises, do not be proud. It is only the ocean lifting you. When your life falls, do not despair. It is only the ocean returning you to its depth. Both movements are sacred. Both are purposeful. Both are divine. The wave that finally recognizes this truth is no longer afraid of ending, because it realizes it never truly began. It was the ocean from the start, and it is the ocean at the end. O seeker, the moment you embrace this, you transcend fear, ego, loneliness, and separation. You become the one who neither rises nor falls. You become the one who simply is. The wave thinks it is a separate entity, a small rising form that has its own beginning and its own end. But this belief is born only from the surface, where appearances dance and illusions create temporary boundaries that have no real existence underneath. For the truth is that the wave is nothing but the ocean taking a momentary shape, a passing expression that the ocean breathes into being and then absorbs back into itself. And this momentary identity the wave calls I is the root of all confusion, all fear, all loneliness, and all spiritual blindness. Because as long as the wave imagines itself independent, it lives in the constant anxiety of disappearing, of falling, of losing what it never owned, of controlling what it never directed. Yet the ocean remains beneath it as the only true essence, the only real existence, the only unfading presence that carries every wave without ever being divided by them, just as the divine reality carries every soul without fragmentation, without loss, without separation. And in this realization, Ibn Arabi reminds you that you are not a being standing before God, but a being within God, nourished by God, moved by God, and entirely inseparable from the divine source that breathed you into existence. For your identity as a separate self is only a temporary curvature on the boundless sea of being. And when you trace your existence deeply, you discover that nothing in you is isolated, not your breath, which belongs to the wind of the divine, not your heartbeat, which echoes the rhythm placed within you by the One, not your consciousness, which is but a mirror reflecting the eternal light, and not even your desires or fears, which rise and fall like tides, responding to cosmic gravities far greater than your limited awareness can hold. And when you look at the wave carefully, you see that it never really begins at one point nor ends at another, because its journey is simply the ocean shifting, the ocean unfolding, the ocean expressing its own depth on the surface where eyes observe but hearts rarely understand. And the same applies to you, for you think your birth was a beginning and your death will be an end. But in truth you are the ocean taking a form called a lifetime, a shape called a person, a moment called me, yet every fiber of your being remains the oceanic truth that existed before the shape and will exist after the shape dissolves. And the illusion of separateness has only one purpose in the spiritual path, to awaken you through its own failure, because the separate self will try to hold, to control, to achieve, to protect. And in all its efforts it will taste exhaustion, emptiness, and the subtle ache of something missing, and that ache is the memory of the ocean calling the wave back to awareness, saying quietly through every experience that you are not small, you are not limited, you are not isolated, and you never were. And once you begin to sense this truth, you realize that what you call your strengths are not yours, but the ocean rising through you, and what you call your weaknesses are not failures, but openings through which the ocean teaches you humility and truth. And your intelligence is not your possession, but a beam from the deep that passes through your mind. And your compassion is not your virtue, but the ocean's nature expressed as tenderness in your heart. And even your mistakes, your regrets, your faults are not stains on your identity, but ripples that help you see the surface for what it is, temporary, shifting, unreal compared to the vastness beneath. And slowly the illusion weakens. Slowly the wave begins to see that it was never separate, never alone, never disconnected from its source. And this awakening does not make the wave disappear, but makes it transparent, light, free. Because once you know you are the ocean, you stop fearing the wind. You stop fearing the crash. You stop fearing the ending. For the ending is nothing but the ocean returning to itself. And to live with this understanding is to finally breathe without fear, to act without arrogance, to love without conditions, and to walk through the world knowing that everything you see is the same ocean wearing a different form, rising and falling, appearing and vanishing, but always made of the same timeless, boundless, indivisible reality that you too are made of. And when this realization settles even slightly within, your life stops feeling like a battle and begins to feel like a remembering that continues, without interruption, and without ever truly reaching an end. The wave struggles only because it believes it stands alone, carrying its own weight, fighting its own storms, and trying to survive forces far greater than itself. But the moment it remembers it is the ocean in motion, the struggle dissolves, not because life becomes easier, but because the false sense of separateness fades. And Ibn Arabi teaches that all suffering born from identity comes from forgetting this unity, this inner belonging, this truth that the self you defend so fiercely is only a temporary ripple within an eternal sea. For when the wave says, "I am rising," it forgets the ocean is the one rising, and when it says, "I am falling," it forgets the ocean is the one shifting, and when it says, "I am lost," it forgets the ocean cannot be lost within itself. And this is the human condition, to claim as personal what is actually divine movement, to interpret divine flow as personal success or failure, and to assume ownership of experiences that pass through you like currents that never belonged to you in the first place. And when the human ego says, "I suffer," it is the wave forgetting its nature, imagining that the storm is happening to it rather than through it, while the ocean beneath remains untouched, vast and still. And in the same way your soul remains untouched beneath the turbulence of emotions, opinions, judgments, fears, and memories, as these are surface events, not the truth of who you are. And Ibn Arabi invites you to dive beneath the surface of yourself, to go deeper than your thoughts, your roles, your history, and your wounds, because beneath them is a self that was never broken and never fragmented, a self that existed before your body, before your personality, before even the concept of you. And when you begin to sense this deeper ground, you discover something extraordinary, that your life has never been separate from the divine choreography that shapes every moment, every encounter, every rise and fall, just as no wave ever moves independently from the ocean's breath. And this recognition does not make you passive or indifferent. Rather, it empowers you with a clarity that frees you from unnecessary suffering. Because once you know you are not separate, you no longer need to prove your worth, no longer need to defend your ego, no longer need to fight for recognition or validation, as all these battles come from the illusion of being a lone wave trying to survive on the surface. And when that illusion fades, the heart becomes light, the mind becomes spacious, and your actions flow with a sincerity and calmness that cannot be forced. For the ocean moves through you effortlessly when you stop resisting or claiming ownership of every movement. And then love becomes natural rather than effortful. Generosity becomes spontaneous rather than calculated. Forgiveness becomes a release rather than a struggle. And patience becomes a natural rhythm rather than a forced virtue. Because the ocean's nature becomes your nature, and you realize that everything you feared losing was never truly yours, and everything you hoped to gain was never outside you. Because the ocean lacks nothing and seeks nothing, and so within you there is a place that lacks nothing and seeks nothing, and your spiritual journey is simply peeling away the layers of illusion until that inner reality shines without interruption. And the most powerful part of this realization is that you begin to see others differently too. For you no longer see waves competing with waves, but the ocean appearing in countless forms, each with its own height, movement, rhythm, and story, yet all sharing one essence, one source, one life. And this dissolves judgment, dissolves envy, dissolves comparison, because how can one wave envy another when both are the same ocean expressing itself differently? And how can one wave despise another when each is fulfilling the movement entrusted to it by the same vast depth? And how can one wave feel superior or inferior when both are temporary gestures of the same infinite reality? And when this understanding roots itself within you even partially, fear loses its sharpness, loneliness loses its heaviness, anger loses its fire, and confusion loses its power, because you recognize that every moment of your life is the ocean speaking to itself, learning from itself, unfolding its own mystery through your experiences. And the more deeply you surrender to this truth, the more gracefully your life flows, not because challenges disappear, but because the sense of I am alone in this disappears, replaced by a quiet certainty that you are held, guided, supported, and moved by something vast, something intimate, something that has always been you yet transcends everything you call me. And in that realization, the wave finally rests, not because the ocean is calm, but because the wave no longer fears the ocean but remembers it is the ocean and continues flowing, without ever feeling separate again. The human heart becomes fragmented only when it forgets its source, just as a wave becomes confused when it believes it has its own center, its own strength, its own independent direction. And Ibn Arabi reminds us that the deepest spiritual wound is forgetfulness, this subtle veil that makes a person believe they exist apart from the one who is breathing through them, sustaining them, shaping them, and appearing as them. And this forgetfulness creates a life of constant inner conflict, because the ego is forced to carry a burden it was never designed to hold, the burden of identity, purpose, meaning, and self-direction. And so a person begins to feel exhausted, not because life is difficult, but because they are trying to live it as a separate wave rather than as the ocean expressing itself in a particular form. And when this illusion takes root, the heart becomes divided between a longing for something infinite and a fear of losing its finite self, a longing to dissolve and a fear of disappearing. a yearning to return home and an anxiety about what home truly means. And this tension becomes the hidden storm inside every seeker, pulling them into directions, one toward the vastness they intuitively know, and the other toward the smallness they mistakenly protect. And Ibn Arabi calls this the drama of the soul, the drama of a wave that feels the ocean inside it but keeps clinging to its temporary shape, trying to preserve something that was never meant to last. And from this clinging arises pride, jealousy, insecurity, greed, arrogance, and fear, all symptoms of a self trying to prove its separateness in a universe that is entirely one. And the heart begins to shrink as it constructs walls around itself, mistaking these walls for identity, building layers of beliefs, labels, and defenses, thinking they protect it, but in truth they suffocate it. And the more the heart contracts, the more isolated it feels. Because contraction is the nature of separation, while expansion is the nature of union, and the heart longs to expand, to breathe, to return to the vastness it came from. Yet it continues to hold tightly to the illusions that keep it small, and this inner contraction shows up in subtle forms: judgments you make about others, fears you carry about the future, wounds you refuse to release, memories you replay again and again. And each of these fragments your awareness into pieces, scattering your energy like shattered reflections on the surface of disturbed water. And Ibn Arabi says, the key to healing this fragmentation is not to fight the ego, but to illuminate it, not to reject the wave, but to let it recognize the ocean flowing through it. And this illumination happens when you soften, when you stop forcing yourself to be a certain image, when you stop defending the boundaries of a self that is already dissolving with every breath you take. And in that softness the heart begins to hear whispers from a deeper place within, a place that has never been wounded, never been divided, never been separate. And the more you turn inward toward this place, the more your identity begins to shift, not through effort but through recognition, as the wave recognizes its own oceanic essence. And suddenly the heart begins to expand, not outward but inward, opening into a spaciousness that feels familiar, like a forgotten homeland you knew long before you were born. And in that expansion, old fears dissolve like mist under sunlight, old patterns lose their grip, old wounds heal without force, because you are no longer living from the contracted self that carries them, but from the spacious truth that transcends them. And in this expansive awareness, the world begins to look different too, because people no longer appear as threats or competitors, but as reflections of the same essence appearing in different shapes. And you begin to feel a compassion that does not come from effort, but from understanding, a love that does not come from desire, but from recognition, a peace that does not come from control, but from surrender. And the fragmentation that once defined your inner world begins to dissolve as your heart synchronizes with the rhythm of the ocean, the rhythm of divine unity. And this is the transformation Ibn Arabi describes, a transformation not of becoming something new, but of returning to what you already are beneath the layers of illusion. And the deeper this recognition sinks into your awareness, the more your life flows with a harmony that cannot be taught and cannot be imitated, because it does not come from thinking or discipline, but from being aligned with the truth of your own nature. And the heart that once felt divided now becomes whole, not because circumstances changed, but because perception changed, because the wave finally understood that its longing for the ocean was actually the ocean longing for itself, and that everything you seek outside is already present within you in a form that cannot be lost or broken or taken away. And in that realization, the heart finds rest in a way it never knew possible, as it dissolves into the vastness it was always a part of and continues flowing without resistance or separateness anymore. At the moment the wave realizes it is the ocean, something profoundly transformative happens inside the human being, because this recognition is not an intellectual idea, not a poetic metaphor, not a mystical fantasy. It is a shift in the very center of consciousness, a collapse of the illusion of separateness that has kept the heart restless and the mind wandering. And Ibn Arabi teaches that this realization is the essence of true Tawhid, not merely that God is one, but that nothing exists outside that one, that every movement, every thought, every breath, every joy, every sorrow, Every rise and fall is the ocean expressing itself through a temporary form. And when this sinks into the heart, the seeker discovers a freedom deeper than anything the world can offer. A freedom that comes from no longer carrying the weight of a personal self trying to manage its own destiny, defend its own boundaries, prove its own worth, or secure its own survival. And this freedom feels like the release of 1,000 invisible burdens at once, because the ego is no longer responsible for maintaining an identity that was never real to begin with. And as the sense of division dissolves, so does the constant inner noise that came from comparison, fear, regret, desire, control, and insecurity, all of which were rooted in the illusion that you were a separate wave struggling against the currents of life. But now you begin to sense that life is not happening to you, but through you, as if an unseen hand is guiding every step, aligning every moment, weaving every thread of your existence into a tapestry far more intricate and purposeful, you said.